Behind these metal gates lurks a world of unexplained twists of fate, weird occurrences, and haunted automobiles. Join us now on an expedition searching for the strange, the eerie, and the unusual. Welcome to the Great American Mystery Cars, an hour unlike any you've ever spent before. Your host is Adam West, who will take you on a tour of a bizarre house and reveal the story of this mysterious automobile. Jan Gabriel and Linda Marshall will show you unusual cars of kings, queens, and movie stars, along with the authentic Bonnie and Clyde death car with actual film footage. Television and movie star Claude Akins will introduce you to the first automobile and the bitter 40-year feud it caused. Comedian Gallagher will show you some crazy cars to tickle your funny bone. And from Graceland, the exotic cars of Elvis Presley and much more. So join us for an intriguing television first, the Great American Mystery Cars. And now, the Great American Mystery Cars with your host, Adam West.
Hello there. Welcome to the Great American Mystery Cars. We've just arrived at the beautiful but bizarre Winchester Mystery House here in San Jose, California. It's the mansion that once belonged to Sarah Winchester, the heiress to the blood-stained Winchester rifle fortune. Later, I'll be telling you why her house is so strange and what's so unique about the garage where she kept her cars. I'll also tell you the incredible story of this sleek and mysterious automobile called the Phantom Corsair, designed by a man who could see into the future. You know, many people believe that automobiles and houses have a mysterious, independent life of their own. Perhaps you yourself have experienced a home with some haunting memories or have owned a car that had a personality all its own. There are individual cars all around the world with stories that strain the imagination. And with the help of some good friends of mine, we'll share with you some mysterious stories. So let's begin by going to Reno, Nevada with Jan Gabriel, Claude Akins, Linda Marshall, and some fascinating automobiles.
This is the Hera Automobile Collection in Reno, Nevada. Hundreds of classic cars valued at millions of dollars are housed here. Thousands of people come each year to see what one man, Bill Hera, accomplished. He was the tycoon of a gambling and hotel empire and loved beautiful cars. Bill spent the last 25 years of his life amassing the largest collection in the world. And this 1911 Maxwell was the beauty that got him started on a collection that filled 3 showrooms with over 1,500 extraordinary automobiles. If Bill Hera hadn't pursued his extravagant hobby, much automobile history would have been lost forever. But here's where the mystery comes in. When he died in 1978, he left no plans for keeping his marvelous collection intact. Now, you would think after spending millions of dollars, he would have wanted to preserve it. Some say he was so possessed by the collection itself that it never occurred to him that anyone would dare to dismantle it after his death. Although some of the cars were sold off, fortunately, the city of Reno has stepped in to help save much of this world-famous collection. And we're about to tell you the story of some of its outstanding showpieces. But before we do, let's go back, all the way back, to the origin of the automobile. Let's travel to the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County and join a man you've seen in hundreds of movies and has starred on dozens of television shows from Sheriff Lobo to Murder, She Wrote, Mr. Claude Akins. He's going to show you the first automobile ever patented.
And this is it, the very first gas-powered motor car. It was patented in 1886 by that famous German inventor, Carl Benz. So, now you know. Henry Ford did not invent the first automobile. However, there were 2 other vehicles we found that were invented even earlier. In 1863, J.J. Etienne Lenoir built the first internal combustion-powered road vehicle, but he only made one and never had it patented. The other was built in 1875 by Siegfried Marcus, an Austrian inventor. Now, he stated publicly that his contraption was a waste of time and money, and he never pursued it further. Carl Benz, on the other hand, wanted to not only build the first car, he intended to market it as well. By 1895, he was selling 135 cars a year to the European market. His car was successful as well as practical, which is why Carl Benz gets the credit for inventing the first gas-powered car. Now, let's take a look at another car that was being built about the same time. This is the workshop of Gottlieb Daimler, who invented the second automobile. Naturally, he thought it was the first. Neither Daimler nor Benz knew each other, even though they lived only 60 miles apart. Benz's patent was granted just 5 months before Daimler's. Then, 40 years later, after years of bitter rivalry, their two companies eventually merged. Race cars built by Daimler represented a significant advancement in both engine and chassis technology. In 1914, they took first, second, and third place in the French Grand Prix that year. The second place car was shipped to the United States by American race driver Ralph De Palma, who drove it to victory in the 1915 Indianapolis 500. By 1926, Benz and Daimler had combined to form a company that continues building world-class cars to this day. So, there you have it, a little bit about the origin of the automobile. And now, Jan and Linda, back to you in Reno, Nevada.
Thanks, Claude Akins. You know, most Hollywood stars love to travel in style, and this man was no different.
Dear Jocelyn, the early bird catches the worm, but who needs worms?
Those are the immortal sounds of the first superstar of talking pictures, Mr. Al Jolson. And this was his 1933 Cadillac Fleetwood. And as you can see, it's luxury all the way. Truly a great car. A lot of Hollywood stars prefer to own specialty cars. Al Jolson was an all-out kind of performer who loved his automobiles and his audiences. This car has been completely restored. As beautiful as the cars in the Harris collection are, most of them were purchased in rather poor condition and upgraded here. Bill Harrah made sure the Jolson car was restored to its original perfection, with all the little details. This car only cost $8,000 when it was new, and you had to be a star to afford it back then in 1933, which was right in the middle of the Depression. Al Jolson certainly enjoyed this luxury car built 53 years ago. But here in this great collection, we have found yet another luxury car built over 75 years ago. It went through a transformation that would make automobile history. And here to tell you the story is Linda Marshall.
Thanks, Jan. This 1907 Thomas touring car is one of the favorites here at Harrah's. She's referred to as Blondie. The manufacturer, E.R. Thomas of Buffalo, New York, bragged about how fast his cars would go. Now, just suppose we strip this beautiful automobile of her top and all dead weight and make a race car out of her. Now, just imagine.
Well, Linda, we don't have to imagine because it actually happened, and this is the car. This is a 1907 Thomas Flyer. On February 12, 1908, this American-built car, along with 3 French cars, 1 Italian, and 1 German car, began what was to be the most incredible endurance race in history. It was the round-the-world New York to Paris automobile race, and this Thomas Flyer was a late entry.
Little was done to modify it for the race. Oh, they did add 12-inch wooden planks to replace the fenders for mud and snow.
And you have to keep in mind that there were no superhighways back then. Day after day, the going got pretty tough.
The race started in Times Square in New York with 50,000 people cheering them on.
They went westward through Buffalo, Cleveland, Toledo, and Chicago.
Early on, the Thomas Flyer made it clear it was the car to beat by establishing a fast early lead. This American entry really had the winning edge with its 70-horsepower engine.
The weather was awful and stayed that way with high snow drifts and nearly impassable roads. West of Chicago, the snow turned to rain, which made the Thomas Flyer's struggle westward even more difficult.
The exhausted competitors finally arrived in San Francisco 41 days after the start of the race. The cars in the running had been reduced to 4: the American Thomas Flyer, the Italian Zust, the French Didion, and the German Protos. All 4 were boarded on ships to continue the race in Japan.
The Japanese had never seen a car before and were so inquisitive that they slowed the progress considerably. And crossing Asia was a nightmare. There just weren't any roads.
What the Flyer did was to straddle the railroad tracks on the Trans-Siberian Railway and drive on the ties, which was very hard on the car. Every time there was a breakdown, the parts had to be replaced or repaired by the crew. It took an incredible amount of ingenuity.
Incredible is the word, all right, but it was the Americans who prevailed and won the race as the Thomas Flyer rolled into Paris on July 30th, 171 days after the start.
The Thomas Flyer had covered 13,341 land miles over 3 continents.
Bill Harrah found this car 56 years later and restored it as a tribute to all the men of the heroic crews who ran the 1908 round the world New York to Paris race. It was an accomplishment never equaled.
Thanks, Jan and Linda. As Claude Akins told you, the first automobile was patented in 1886. 2 years earlier, in 1884, Sarah Pardee Winchester moved to this house. Back then, it was only 8 rooms. Now there are 160 rooms that sprawl over 6 acres.
Exploring this strange Victorian mansion that Sarah Winchester built is no easy task. You really have to begin here in this plain little room. It's the seance room, and it's the heart of the house, surrounded by a confusing maze of 160 rooms. It's said that Sarah Winchester was a woman driven by guilt and the terror of vengeance from beyond the grave. The tragic deaths of her infant daughter and husband forced her to consult a medium who convinced her that her whole family had been cursed by the souls of those who'd been murdered by the Winchester rifle. And there was only one chance for salvation. She must move west and construct a house that would never be finished. Only then could she placate the spirits and achieve eternal life. According to legend, Sarah came to this room each night between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. She summoned her ghostly accusers. They gave her the mythical commands for building her house. Then each day she gave orders to her army of carpenters who worked unceasingly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 38 years. There are rooms that are literally built around each other. Priceless Tiffany stained glass windows look out on inner walls or are completely hidden in closets. The stairways can be treacherous. They twist and turn, leading back to where you started. Here are a series of steps that lead mysteriously to the ceiling and stop. Only a ghost could get to the upper floor. The storage space in closets and cupboards can vary from the size of a 3-room apartment to only 1 inch. You never know what you'll find when you open a door. In this case, it's a blank wall. Here, the first step can kill you. It's a 1-story drop. There's no question about it. This is the house that guilt built. And with its bell towers, weather vane, turrets, gables, skylights, and Victorian gingerbread, believe me, there's nothing like it in all the world. A person could disappear behind these walls and never be heard of again. That door won't open, and there's no floor behind this door. How am I going to get out of here? When I started Batman, I used to get out of situations more dangerous than this. It's as easy as saying, holy ghosts.
As you can see, I've still got the old touch. In the late 1930s, the Winchester house was closed. People feared that the place was haunted. At the same time, this mysterious car was being built. Come to think of it, both the house and the car have a lot in common. They're beautiful and they're mysterious, and they have stories involving bizarre twists of fate. The car, called the Phantom Corsair, may even be haunted. The 2 men who loved it the most both died in tragic car crashes, but that's only part of the story. It all began back in 1936 with a 23-year-old Yale dropout named Rust Hines. He was the heir to the famous ketchup and pickle fortune. You know, the 57 varieties, folks. He was obsessed with his dreams of a futuristic vision he called the Phantom Corsair. His family in Pittsburgh wanted him to grow up and take over the factory, but Rust was determined to make his dream a reality. Fortunately for him, two car builders from Pasadena, California, named Bowman and Schwartz, were smart enough to recognize real genius when they saw it. They willingly provided the practical expertise Rust needed. The car breezed through all the tests in a specially constructed wind tunnel and was soon ready for full-scale construction. Nothing like the Phantom Corsair had ever been seen before. The soaring lines of its full-envelope aluminum body seemed to be moving even when standing still. It was strictly Buck Rogers. The fog lights were built in with chrome-lined tunnels that reflected light to the sides of the car. Wrap-around steel bumpers were controlled hydraulically. The doors open electrically, and little wings raised the roof, making it easier to enter. The dashboard gadgets monitor everything from oil pressure to altitude. And most importantly, the entire interior was padded with cork paneling. The emphasis was on safety and comfort. The Phantom Corsair was far ahead of its time, but unfortunately, time had run out for young Rust Hines. On the way to the first public showing of his beloved Phantom Corsair, he was killed in an automobile accident driving another car. His hopes for marketing his Phantom were tragically ended. Still, the car has endured. It starred opposite Paulette Goddard and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in the 1939 film Young at Heart, portraying a mysterious vehicle called the Flying Wombat. The Phantom Corsair was sold to a number of owners during the years that followed. Then in 1951, it was bought by comedian Herb Schreiner, who shared the same love for this amazing vehicle that Rust Hines once had. Schreiner, too, was killed in an automobile accident while driving another car. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Perhaps both would still be alive if only they'd been driving the Phantom Corsair. The car remains an enduring monument to a young man's dream. You know, this Phantom Corsair looks like the first cousin to my old Batmobile, which I let Robin drive around Hollywood these days. Speaking of Hollywood, it's the home of some pretty fast characters, including my friend, the one and only Gallagher.
Hi, gang. Welcome to the streets of Hollywood. Today we're going to be asking the big mysteries of the automotive world, like why aren't there watermelon cars? They make a roll bar on a car. You'd think they'd make something that you could roll over. That watermelon not only rolls over, it sets world records. Let's jump 4 school buses. Wasn't that more fun, gang? I wonder why they don't build a car like that. Well, it's a mystery. Boy, I don't know why they don't put a big mirror on the front end of a car so you can see around the bush at the corner and don't have to hang your motor out in the intersection. Why don't they do that? It's a mystery. Why don't they hang your old tires around a car like a tugboat so people could bash into you and not hurt the finish? Why don't they do that? It's a mystery. Well, why not put a horn light up on top of the car so when you honk the horn, it leaves the light on and people know who's mad? Why don't they do that? It's a mystery. You know the people you get mad at, too. They're the ones going over the overpass with the turn signal on. Boy, I think Detroit ought to connect the turn signal with the wheel so it blink a couple of times and then turn the wheel and make those people commit to a decision. You know the ones I'm talking about. They're the ones leaning forward in the car going uphill. Yep, I'm telling the truth. It's those people with a compass on the dashboard that don't know where they're going. We need to get them off the road. How they got a license, I don't know. It's a mystery. Now, how about making these truck drivers drive from in front of the grill work so they won't run up on our back end so much? Why don't they do that? It's a mystery. And why not spend all of our defense money on making campers with a missile on top, kind of ICBMWs, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Winnebagos? Boy, wouldn't the Russians be afraid of us out for the weekend with a 6-pack and a Polaris? Let's do it, gang. Why not? It's a mystery. I like a big car. It's America. When I see them Americans driving them rice-burning cars, I think to myself, you could have had a V8. Then I saw a Love truck, but then it wasn't made for love. It didn't have heavy-duty shocks. It didn't have windshield wipers on the inside. It didn't have a steering wheel made out of Nerf. What about this, gang? A pants leg and a shoe. You could hang this out the door of your car. It's kind of a diversionary tactic. You like that? You've seen the sign, baby on board. Here it is. There's that baby on board. You know, I wish I had a rubber stick-em dart gun. Every time I see somebody driving stupid, I could just hang out the window of my car and shoot them in the trunk, and it would stick there with a little sign that said stupid on it. Then when the cops come by and see a car with about a dozen of these on the back end, he just pull them over and give them a ticket for being stupid. Why don't they do that? It's a mystery. Hi, gang. Well, it's time to wrap it up. Whatever it is, it's a pile of trash. It's a car cover. It's a way of you getting a good parking space when it says no parking. You just put a pile of trash in there. It's also a way of keeping the bank from repossessing your car. You just roll her up. Well, I wish I could stay all day, but I got things to do. And it's back to you, Adam. Boy, I wish everybody drived as good as me.
Another stimulating driving lesson from Wrong Way Gallagher. I've been telling you about Sarah Winchester and her house, but this program is mostly about mysterious automobiles. Sarah owned 3, a Renault, a Buick, and a Pierce Arrow. Her contribution to automotive technology is one of great significance, and I'll tell you about it later in the program. She bought a Pierce Arrow in 1911, the same year the Indianapolis 500 began. And here to tell us about some Indianapolis cars with strange and unusual stories is the voice of the Indianapolis 500, Paul Page.
This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum. It is here where they house the great racing cars of the decades and pay tribute to the men who drove them. There are many myths and legends connected with the unrelenting quest for speed. It was a mystery to many how the Marmon Wasp became the first car to win the very first 500-mile race back in 1911. Driven by Ray Haroon, it was dubbed unsafe and unreliable because it was a single-seater, the only one of its kind in that first race. It won with an average speed of 74.5 miles an hour. Every tale that is told about these mysterious and powerful machines contains a dose of the unusual, even the bizarre. In racing, death is a constant passenger. Only the most daring and skilled driver can take a car to the limit and avoid disaster. But there was one car that even the best could not tame. The mystery surrounding the Bose Sealfast Special continues even today. In 1935, a driver named Johnny Hannon had been hired by car owner Leon DeRay to make his debut at Indianapolis by driving number 45. Although a rookie, Hannon's previous accomplishments had given him the credibility to run at Indy. He felt confident that he was going to win the 500 this first time out. It was never to happen. During his first practice run, Hannon never appeared through the 4th turn. No one had reported seeing the car stop on the track. In fact, the car was nowhere in sight. Finally, DeRay found fresh skid marks in turn 3. As he looked over the wall, he was shocked to discover his damaged race car sitting upright on the edge of a cornfield. Hannon was dead, his riding mechanic severely injured. Hannon's quest for instant speed had brought him to a swift meeting with death. That one incident, however, was not to be the end of the mystery and tragedy surrounding number 45. Only 6 days later, veteran driver Clay Weatherly qualified the car for the 9th row. Here's where the story becomes almost bizarre. On the 10th lap, Weatherly, like Hannon before him, lost control of the machine and crashed. He died instantly, and his riding mechanic was also killed. The tragedy put a pall on the running of the 1935 race, as the mystery surrounding this death car intensified. What prompted both drivers to lose control? Was foul play involved? Was the car jinxed? Why wasn't it pulled from the race after the first fatality? Well, today, these questions still go unanswered, but the story does not end here. In 1936, this infamous car was back in the lineup, driven by a young Frenchman named Cliff Berger. Why any driver would accept a ride in the same machine that had killed 3 of his colleagues within 9 days of each other is unknown. But because Berger did, the jinx that had haunted the Bose Seal Fast Special was now broken. The 1936 driver of Leon Duray's death car did not win the race that year. But unlike his predecessors, he did live to tell about it. I'm Paul Page.
And now, back to Adam West.
I'm sure you've gathered by now that Sarah Winchester was more than a little eccentric. Actually, it goes even deeper. She zealously guarded her privacy. Uninvited guests were unwelcome, and that even included the President of the United States, who tried to get through these front doors and failed. In 1903, Teddy Roosevelt was visiting the area and was curious to see the outlandish Winchester house that he'd heard so much about. So he paid a surprise visit, but Sarah refused to see him. So he got back into his official carriage and returned to Washington without saying a word. Horse-drawn presidential carriages lost their usefulness along about 1909. To tell us more from the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village, Michigan, is the lovely Eleanor Mondale.
Thanks, Adam. You know, this is the very same carriage that President Roosevelt used riding away from Sarah Winchester's house. Teddy Roosevelt was a very skilled rider, and he loved beautiful horses. The thoroughbreds that pulled this rig were considered the finest in the country. Perhaps that's why there were no motor cars in the White House. Then in 1909, President William Howard Taft finally changed the stables into a garage. He purchased the first 4 cars in the presidential fleet, a White steamer, 2 Pierce Arrows, and a Baker Electric. Both the president and his lady were mad for motor cars. In President Taft's time, the cars were bought outright. In contrast, the cars of Franklin Delano Roosevelt were especially built for him, like this 1939 Lincoln convertible nicknamed the Sunshine Special. It was shipped around the world to such exotic places as Casablanca and Yalta. During World War II, protective armor was added, including a compartment for firearms and submachine guns to protect FDR from assassins. The next president, Harry S. Truman, retired it in 1950 in favor of this up-to-the-minute Lincoln Cosmopolitan. Unlike the ready-made models, this car has enough headroom for even the tallest top hat. President Eisenhower was responsible for adding the clear plastic bubble top over the backseat of the car. He liked being visible to the crowds while still feeling protected. Of all the presidential vehicles, this elongated 1961 Lincoln Continental remains at the center of one of the greatest mysteries in American history. This is the car which President Kennedy was riding in the day he was assassinated. Controversy has raged ever since on the true circumstances behind his brutal murder, but loss of evidence and disappearing witnesses have ensured the impossibility of formal prosecution. The car was more luxurious and contained more special features than any other automobile used at the White House. After the tragic events of November 22, 1963, President Johnson had the limousine sent back to Detroit for remodeling. When it rejoined the official fleet in 1964, the presidential Continental had undergone a somber transformation. It contained enough armor plating to resist a landmine and weighed more than 5 tons. Even so, LBJ was always uneasy when he rode in it. The car remained in use for Presidents Nixon and Ford. Then when Jimmy Carter became president, and my father vice president, they retired the car here at the Henry Ford Museum. I had the opportunity to ride in a presidential limousine with my father many times, and I must say I felt very safe and very secure. I'm Eleanor Mondale. Back to you, Adam West, in San Jose, California.
Thanks, Eleanor. Teddy Roosevelt wasn't the only person snubbed by Mrs. Winchester. As time went on, she retreated further and further from public view until the only two people she saw were her butler and her secretary. Still, she avidly directed the construction on her house, inventing new ways to make her estate function more efficiently. This call box to summon her servants was one of her many extraordinary inventions. This storage room is stacked with priceless wall coverings, costly veneers, and masterpieces in stained glass. Her delicate stained glass windows were designed by Tiffany's of New York. On the rare occasions when she left the house, Sarah rode like a queen in a splendid chauffeur-driven Pierce Arrow that reflected her exquisite taste. There's no doubt that Mrs. Winchester would have appreciated the artwork that's been created concerning the automobile. Let's take a look at some of these masterpieces. The Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art was the site of an extraordinary exhibit, bringing together works by Salvador Dali, Matisse, Picasso, and others. Some are abstract, some are traditional, but no matter how complex, they all explore the mystery of the automobile from the artist's point of view. Some of the profound meanings behind these works of art are easy to understand. Others are a little more difficult. Each painting, photograph, or sculpture tells its own unique story, incorporating fantasy or stark reality. The point of fact is that the car is a necessity that brings us convenience, joy, and even at times tragedy. But no matter how it's depicted, the automobile has become an extension of ourselves.
The staggering body count in our highways each year is a national disgrace. There have been a number of brilliant and talented people who've lost their lives. Geniuses like Rust Hines and the most promising young movie star of the 1950s, James Dean. For more, let's go back to Jan Gabriel and Linda Marshall in Reno, Nevada.
If a man can bridge the gap between life and death, if he can live on after he's dead, then maybe he was a great man. James Dean said that, and perhaps he knew something about the future because he became even a greater star after he was killed in an automobile accident in 1955. But James Dean was different. He had a unique style all his own. And back in the 50s, everyone wanted to be just like James Dean. He was the kind of guy who marched to a different drummer. James Dean was one movie star who always seemed real to us. We could relate to him. He came from the bright lights of Broadway to Hollywood and made only 3 films in his short career: East of Eden, Giant, and his most popular film, Rebel Without a Cause, which co-starred Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo, and this 1949 two-door Mercury Coupe. In fact, this car was the inspiration for the first of the custom car designers. They'd take off all the excess chrome to give it a sleeker look. It was called nosing and decking. All things considered, I'd say this 1949 Mercury was the perfect choice when Warner Brothers needed a hot car to co-star with James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. And now, here's Linda.
This car ought to be stashed in Fort Knox. This 1931 Bugatti Royale was appraised in 1983 at $2 million. That was 3 years ago. Only the good Lord and the next owner know what it's worth today. Some say as much as $10 million. And why? First, it's a Bugatti, and only 6 of this model were ever built. It's one of the largest passenger cars ever made, almost 20 feet long. The smooth and powerful 300 horsepower engine is a mechanical masterpiece. It has the world's largest straight-8 engine block and cylinder head made by hand, and it's beautiful enough to have been sculptured by an artist. The car was reputedly built for King Carol of Romania, but a few years later found its way back to France. In an effort to avoid capture or destruction by the German army in 1939, the car was hidden in the sewers of Paris until the end of the war. Bill Harrah acquired the car and made it part of his collection in 1964. This car is to automobiles what the Hope Diamond is to jewelry.
One of the prime factors that makes the Harrah car collection so outstanding is the painstaking detail that goes into restoring every car. It's all done right here in the best equipped, most complete restoration shop in the world. They'd even restore your classic car. Now, here's an example of a car that's in for a little work. It looks as though it was the first car with air conditioning. Actually, those are real bullet holes. And this car once belonged to 2 of the most notorious bank robbers and murderers of the 1930s, Bonnie and Clyde. And And here's Bonnie Parker herself to tell us the real story.
Thanks a lot, Jan. I'm really glad I'm not Bonnie Parker, because this is the very car she and Clyde Barrow were driving when they were ambushed by the law. This is the authentic Bonnie and Clyde death car.
You might say it was the last ride for Bonnie and Clyde.
The truth is, they were lovers in crime who paid a heavy price for defying the law. Bonnie Parker was from a comfortable, middle-class family in a suburb of Dallas. She didn't have to steal.
On the other hand, Clyde Barrow was a sharecropper's son who by 1932 was establishing a reputation as a car thief, bank robber, and cold-blooded killer of a dozen men. Then he met Bonnie Parker, who was bored with being a waitress and eager for action. The two of them went on a ruthless crime spree that shocked law-abiding citizens in 5 states.
While waiting on a side road outside Grapevine, Texas for other members of their gang, Clyde and his cigar-smoking moll, Bonnie, viciously gunned down 2 state troopers.
It was these atrocious murders that sealed their doom. Outraged, Dallas County Sheriff Newt Smith said to his deputies, Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton, "I want those 2, and I don't care what you have to do to get them." Alcorn was the only lawman who could identify them. And on May 23, 1934, after a year of pursuit, a tip-off sent him and 5 other peace officers to a rural area just outside of Arcadia, Louisiana, where they set their trap and waited for the vicious pair to show up. Their patience paid off.
At 8:30 in the morning, a 1934 4-door Ford sedan rumbled down the country road directly into the lawman's gun sights. Alcorn was quick to identify Clyde Barrow. He waited until the last possible moment, then yelled,
"That's him, for sure."
The 6 lawmen stood and fired.
160 bullets ripped through the car door, passing through both Clyde and Bonnie, exiting through the other door. The officers weren't taking any chances. They intended to stop them cold, and they did.
Found in the car was Clyde's arsenal of 2 sawed-off shotguns, 2 machine guns, 10 automatic pistols, and 1,500 rounds of ammunition.
They were young and in love and quick on the trigger. But in the end, Bonnie and Clyde died as they lived, by the gun.
We're back exploring the Winchester house, lost in luxurious surroundings such as this magnificent grand ballroom. Can you see yourself dancing across this elegant parquet floor above a silver chandelier with a magical number of 13 candles? Sarah could. She decided to give a ball soon after the room was completed. A gourmet supper was served off golden plates with rare wines sparkling in crystal goblets. Tuxedoed musicians played, and the butler formally announced the name of each arriving guest. Except there were no guests, and Sarah danced through the evening alone. Oh, if you're eccentric, it helps to be rich. For example, the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, was a millionaire who liked to live life his own way, and like Sarah, he enjoyed the seclusion of a big house. One of Elvis's closest friends was George Klein, who's about to take us on a tour of Graceland Mansion in Memphis, Tennessee, and share some of his memories of Elvis and his cars.
Here at Graceland, Elvis would slip in and out of these famous gates in many of his exotic cars, and once he brought a beautiful Panamera home to show off to the guys, and he went out and he was going to take us for a ride in it. It wouldn't start. It was kind of embarrassing. Would you believe he took out a gun, he shot the car, and the doggone thing started? Let's go up to the house now. Elvis was always in a hurry to get back here at Graceland. He loved it here. This was his sanctuary, his playground, if you will. A lot of great rooms inside. Come on, let's go inside and take a look. Graceland was filled with many grown-up toys. There was plenty of activity always. Elvis could play music with his friends, shoot pool, race slot cars, practice karate, and there was always plenty of movie stars who loved to drop by and party with Elvis. And Elvis loved to party.
The bread is getting hot. Everybody come and taste the possum pop have a party tonight. We're gonna have.
There are several of Elvis's cars on display here at Graceland, including these two beautiful Stutz, which Elvis used to love to flash around Memphis in. In fact, one Memphis Cadillac dealer remembers selling Elvis more than 100 luxury cars. One of his favorite Cadillacs was this stretch limo with gold-trimmed interior. It had all the comforts, a small bar, refrigerator, and TV set. Me and the boys, we loved joyriding in this beauty. Hundreds of thousands of people visit Graceland every year to relive and remember the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley.
Everybody come and taste the possum pop shot. Let's have a party. Let's have a party. Let's have a party. Let's have a party. Send into the store. Let's buy some more. Let's have a party tonight. We're gonna have a party tonight.
On the morning of September 5th, 1922, the round-the-clock work on this incredible house stopped. Sarah Winchester had died quietly in her sleep. Now she too travels with the spirits. Her most surprising legacy, it's in the garage. I'll show you. Sarah installed this oil-burning cast iron stove. The stove heated the water in this galvanized tank, which was fed up into the ceiling to this deceptively simple device consisting of a pipe and a rotating nozzle. It created a spray of cascading water. You see, Sarah invented the first car wash. One wonders what she would have thought of the automobiles we drive today, with their advanced safety features, sophisticated emission controls, and computers. Our high-tech world would probably boggle her imagination. Technology keeps changing every day, and the luxury car of today quickly becomes the museum piece of tomorrow. It makes you wonder about life in the future. What kind of cars will our children be driving in the year 2000? Let's take a look at some likely candidates. Well, there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed probing into the mysteries behind these fabulous cars as much as I have. Not every automobile comes with a mystery attached to it, but they do all have the power to transport us wherever we want to go with speed and comfort. I hope that you'll give them the respect they deserve, keep your eyes and ears open, and drive safely. Now, for all of us here on the program, I'd like to say thanks for looking in. I'm Adam West for the Great American Mystery Cars.